thank you so much for joining me for this 10 cards 1 kit, Love from Lizi, March 2018 card kit. Card 1, I used a panel that was in the 12 by 12 sheet and used some selective cutting of other panels and placed those selected flower cuts on top of the panel. The panel was secured to a pink card base. The thanks die is a lawn fawn die, as is the banner. The thanks was applied to the banner. The banner was given a little bit of dimension, and this was attached and tucked under a flower on the card front. Limoncello, Nuvo, crystal drops was added. Sepia ink stamped You Are the Sweetest on the inside panel, and the Valentine border cuts from Lawn Fawn cut out the little hearts along the bottom. The inside panel was attached to the card base, and that finishes this card. Glossy accents was added to the center of the pink flower, and now we're on to card number 2. Ranger Archival ink was used to stamp this gingham background stamp onto a cross-stitch square panel. Tumbled glass distress ink was blended very lightly onto the top portion of the outside card panel. Soft yellow ink inked up this tip-top background stamp, and that was applied over the top of the blue blended portion. If too much of the blue had been applied, the yellow would turn green. A corner of the cross-stitch square was cut off and dimensional foam was applied to the back. This was attached just below the tip-top stamped image. I'm just laying out my watercolored elements to see how they're going to look. Using sepia ink, I stamped Treat Yourself and then heat embossed with clear Nuvo embossing powder. 2 pieces of fun foam were attached to the back of the watercolored image on each side of a toothpick that I placed there with Nuvo Deluxe glue. The Trust Yourself strip was trimmed down and flagged on the end. The outside panel is attached to the front of the card base. I twisted the Treat Yourself banner around the toothpick. Nuvo Deluxe glue secured that at the top, and then taking the same Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and putting some on the back of the fun foam and applying the watercolored image to the card front. The special card front panel was cut down using a Lawn Fawn rectangle stitch die. I used the same soft yellow ink directly in the center with a very light hand on the inside panel of the card base. I stamped Gingham in the same yellow ink along the bottom, and then You're the Sweetest was stamped with sepia. A copper peel off went above the stamp border on the bottom, and the inside panel is attached to the inside of the card base. Glossy accents enhanced the maple syrup watercolor portion of the stamped image. And there's your finished card. On to card number 3. This card I just took 2 panels, one vellum and one out of cardstock, and cut them to exactly how I wanted them. I applied Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and then removed a little bit with a piece of scrap. Because I glued the cardstock onto vellum, I needed to apply some pressure. The specialized herringbone card panel was trimmed down and applied to the green cardstock. 2 strips of the pattern 6x6 paper were cut and applied vertically down both sides of the card front, and then the specialized paper cardstock was then added between those 2 stripes. Copper peel-offs were also attached to both sides of the stripes, framing the outside panel. I then took the 6x6 striped paper and cut a good sized strip off of that, and then layered up the green, the specialized cardstock panel, and a peel off. This time I glued the inside panel bottom to the top of the layered strips of paper. I trimmed that down and then applied that to the inside of the card base. The front portion was applied to the outside of the card, and then some glossy accents accented the cherry on top. And this finishes this card. And now card 4. Card 4 uses a few stamped images from the stamp set, which I watercolored, along with a coffee cup image from Avriel. I assembled the cup and then blended some Mermaid Lagoon on the top of the outside card panel, and then dried Marigold to the bottom portion, darker in the center and lighter on the perimeter. My watercolored image was laid on to the left-hand side of the card so that I could stamp with the Memento hot cocoa ink where the steam would be coming out of the coffee lid. Placing the cup down with dimension, the cupcake with the blueberries had the extra dimension, so 2 layers, and then the cookies had the same thickness. I took a stripe of pattern paper off of a 12 by 12 sheet and attached that using the N series of Copic markers just in 1 and 3, and added a grounding to that strip. I cut out a little piece out of the center of this special card base that was included in the kit to use on this card a little bit here after I applied this copper peel off that went along the bottom of the striped strip, just below or just above the grounding, pardon me. Fun foam was added to the specialized card base, and then the adhesive was applied to the back of that foam and the panel secured to the front of the card base. Distress Oxide and Antique Linen stamped the card image again, and then I brought the hot cocoa Memento ink back to stamp, fueled by cake, coffee, and crafting. I added a few of the coffee beans. I then added another strip matching the outside strip. Because this was really thin, I attached a post-it note, which is a good little hint when you find it hard to use narrow pieces, and then secured the inside of the card to the card base. The small piece that was taken from the specialized card panel was then applied to the front of the card, and an Inspire sticker, which was trimmed down from the sticker sheet and applied on top of that banner. Crystal accents, or glossy accents, pardon me, highlighted the blueberries on the muffin, and there is the finished card. Card number 5. Card number 5 is a more of a sophisticated gift card holder for your mom or somebody that's female. I used the Lacy border dies by Fawn, and spun sugar. Blending the ink over 4 of 2 different types of borders, so 4 pieces. I then cut 5 squares with the cross stitch Lawn Fawn Stackables, cutting off an end on both sides. This leaves a strip on the inside left over from 2 pieces, and you'll use this to make the belly band or the enclosure. It's not really a belly band. I marked off where all of the score lines would be so that I could measure the distance, and then I cut off the extra that was hanging off to the side, essentially squaring off each one of those corners. I applied the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to the cross stitch square tip and applied the Lacy border to that. One strip of the border does one tip of the cross stitch square. You must apply the top and the bottom with the lace around the perimeter of those tips, and then the 2 side pieces. When you're finished with this, you can apply another square to the back to finish up any of the edges so that it's nicely presentable to whoever you're going to give it to. You can also write your message on the back. But for this one, I utilized vellum square that was on the 12 by 12 sheet. There's copper all around the perimeter there. Make sure that you burnish your score lines well. And then using a sticker from the sticker sheet that matched this vellum piece, I took my static tool and dusted the back, and now I'm applying a thin foam square to the left-hand side of the sticker. I applied this flush with the left-hand side of the square. And the adhesive is only on one side. Now this is the piece that was inside of the 2 edges that were chopped off. So you just apply that, or put that up to the image, chop it off, and then tuck that underneath your lacy border. I placed a magnet on that one with glue, and then the one that would be on the paper was attached to the back of that with glue, and then I folded it back and held it until it dried. I then took a different pattern of the lacy border and applied those to the sticker, top and bottom. The copper foil peel-offs were placed right up against the sticker on each one of the front closures. I also cut a small circles and covered up the magnets so that you don't see them. And that is your sophisticated gift card. And now we're on to card number 6. This one is St. Patrick's Day card. I used a piece of the 6x6 pattern paper and cut it down to make a card front. I cut a shamrock to the center of it towards the top, and then I placed some acetate along the back. I used up some foam strips that I had, making sure to leave just a little pocket for the sequins and seed beads to fit in, just around the shamrock and not the whole front of the card. I then thought, well, I'll get my static tool out and apply that, because I cut some of the really tiny shamrocks out of the green vellum that was on the 12 by 12 vellum panel, using the sequins from Love from Lizi, as well as a few seed beads. And then I just attached the backing, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of cardstock. And both of these enclosed panel, we'll call it, was attached to the card front. I layered sequins from the Love from Lizi sequins, keeping with the green theme. And then the limoncello Nuvo crystal drops went in the center of each so that they'll glisten and really pick up sunlight and reflections. Lucky Clover distressed the edges of the inside panel, and then St. Patrick's Day was stamped with the Kelly green ink. A shamrock that was cut from the Kelly green ink pad to paper coloring technique was applied to the inside. And happy St. Patrick's Day. And now we're on to card number 7. Card number 7 utilizes the pattern paper and the vellum 12 by 12 sheet. I cut it back and I ran that vellum piece through the Xyron machine and then placed the whole panel onto a piece of vanilla cardstock. The 6 by 6 pattern piece was cut down to make the front panel, and that panel was attached to a piece of brown cardstock. A piece of ribbon was placed around the smaller panel with the vellum rose, and then a piece of fun foam was attached to the back of that small panel. Once it was set, I took that small panel and applied adhesive to the back of the fun foam and attached that to brown cardstock, which matches the first panel. Happy Mother's Day was stamped with a sepia ink, and that was trimmed down to make a banner. The banner was attached to the brown cardstock again, and then trimmed down for a layered banner. The layered banner was attached to the small rose vellum panel, and this rose vellum panel was placed in the center of the pattern paper. The pattern paper was attached to the front of the card base, and then the inside card panel was attached also with a reserved piece of the 6 by 6 paper placed on the inside. And that finishes this card. And now we're on to card number 8. Card number 8 uses the dies. I cut out 3 hexagons in a cluster and applied the pattern paper, which these were cut out of, onto a pink cardstock panel. The pink cardstock panel then had these hexagons put back in place with a piece of pink fun foam attached to the back to give it dimension. 3 images from the stamp set were watercolored, and these were placed into the center of the hexagons towards the bottom of each hexagon. The images were also given a slight bit of dimension. I applied this panel to the front of the card base, and these are all A2 cards. A strip was cut from the pattern paper, 6 by 6 pattern paper, and attached to the bottom of the inside panel. And then this inside panel was adhered to the center of the card base, the inside of the card base, pardon me. One of the acetate words in hello was attached to the front of the card, and that completes this card. Card number 9, I trim one of the panels, and then I take spun sugar and I distress the edges. I then take an X-Acto knife and cut out the oval out of the center, and with gathered twigs I go around the perimeter of that oval. I then cut an oval out of fun foam with an X-Acto knife. I guess this is a Fisker's knife. And then when I was done that, I applied some strong double-sided adhesive and then gave that a good burnishing so that it would stick well. I attached the oval to that fun foam, and then I used a frame, I think this is an MFT, and cut out a panel out of the texturized chocolate cardstock. The frame, the pink frame, was attached to the card front panel, and then the inside with the elevated or dimensional oval center was also attached to the front of the card base. The same pink pattern that was on the frame was found in the papers, in the 6x6 papers, so I cut a strip of that and applied that to the inside. And then cut a small strip of the chocolate cardstock and applied that on top of the pink strip. And this completes the card. I like to leave cards without sentiments on them sometimes so that I can add them later. And now we're on to card number 10. Card number 10 utilizes a square panel that was on this 12x12 sheet. I've just done some cutting around the edge of the flowers. And then I found another panel which had the same flowers, so I decided to cut those off. Trim them down right to the edge of the flower. I then used some greenery dyes and the green papers that were leftover scraps from the 12x12 paper sheet. Cardstock sheet, pardon me. I applied that Believe in Yourself with the flowers on each top and bottom corner to a black card base. I cut a couple strips of a 6x6 pattern paper. And then the specialized card bases, I got 2 small out of the pearlescent pink. I applied the striped strip to the bottom and then the pearlized pink to the top of that strip. The greenery was added to the front, tucking it in around the banners as well as where the flowers would naturally have some kind of greenery. The same strips were applied to the inside of the card. First the stripe, and then the pearlized pink using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I applied this panel to the inside of the black card base. Found a vellum flower that was the same, so I attached that to some white cardstock so it would show up, putting some dimension between the 2 layers, and then attaching this over the edge of the greenery in one spot in the right top corner. A piece of greenery was attached to the inside panel. And here you have it. Sequins from the kit was applied as well as the limoncello. And here's your finished card. Here's a rundown of all 10 cards. I'm curious to see which one you like the best. And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.